All right, Kapitol Conversations, episode number 5. Name still pending. Now, we know that we've got a great guest today because Dave will only come if it meets his level of enthusiasm. So that's right. So if Dave comes, we know we've got a good guest this week. So introduction, Simon Cooper, Chief Development Officer, NEXTDC. Yep, very, very exciting to have Simon here today. One of our, clearly our best ever customer that we've ever had and one of our very first customers. So it's great to have you here today, Simon.
Thank you.
What we might start with, Simon, I thought it might be interesting just to discuss your background because you have it hasn't always been data centers and so maybe if you want to run us through how you've got to where you are today.
Yeah.
But you don't have to go back it doesn't need to be too deep and psychological and what terrible things you did when you were 18, but
right. After World War II. Yeah, so I did electrical and electronic engineering as a degree in the UK at Nottingham. But through my career, slowly figured out that the actual pure engineering was probably better left to people that really wanted to be engineers. And I enjoyed systems engineering and then working with engineers in business. And that ended me up in subsea cable system deployment and then subsea cable investment. So the subsea submarine cables that essentially connect the internet around the world. The vast majority of traffic, for those who aren't aware, goes under the ocean. A bit more goes above now with SpaceX and low Earth orbit satellites. But yeah, so I spent probably 20 years designing and buying and investing and building those systems. That got me to Singapore, where I spent 6 years, actually met my wife there, who's from Brazil. That's another interesting, fun story, but we'll leave that off the agenda for today.
That's a different type of podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
And in doing that subsea cable work, I struck up a relationship with a guy called Bevan Slattery, who was or is extremely successful entrepreneur. In fact, won an award in Queensland a couple of days ago that was up all in my feed. So well done, Bevan. That's huge.
In some regards, he'd almost be, I don't know how you'd rank these things, but he's one of Australia's great entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneur, created several amazing businesses.
Indeed, yeah. And he's so focused and no holds barred, says what he thinks. And when he thinks, it's very deep. And so working out a subsea relationship deal that his company was building something, we had something we could sell. It worked out. He delivered the first non-large telco international connection into Australia that started revolutionizing the fiber industry. And so he went on and ultimately he sold that business and had seen what was happening in the data center space in North America and Europe. So this was back in 2008, 9, 10, 11 sort of thing.
Yep.
And so took some of the funds that came out of that sale and bought some land and essentially decided to start NEXTDC. I knew him. I'd got to the point at my organization where I was maybe ready for a change or a possible step up. And they were looking for a chief operating officer at the time. I don't think any of us involved in the hiring or me deciding to do it or my wife agreeing to do it knew exactly what we were all getting ourselves into.
Yep.
But as I've said to many people, you kind of have to look at some opportunities and say, if I don't do this, how does my life carry on being interesting and challenging?
And obviously people would know NEXTDC now as, I don't know if you're the biggest, but you'd be one of two, I guess, in terms of data center operators in Australia, pretty comfortably, I'd imagine. What was it when you joined?
So when I joined, I literally walked into the office on a Saturday morning in Brisbane in November in 2011, and there was maybe 5 or 6 people in who decided to come in and say hello to me and help me kind of find my feet on a Saturday. And they were very, very excited because literally the week before they'd opened their first data center, which was the B1 site in Brisbane, 2-megawatt office conversion, has been full ever since, more or less, and has been great. And I said to them, that's fantastic, well done. Can I meet the ops team, please, or the FM team? We don't have one of those yet. So we're very, very early stage.
Yeah,
maybe 20 people in the whole organization. And certainly from a management perspective, Bevan as the sort of driving force, all roads kind of led to him at that point. They'd already gone public. So that was another very different, on the back of being very successful with the metro fiber and subsea business pipe. He, I think, and saw that the amount of funding that was going to be required to build all this infrastructure was going to need as many funding sources as possible. Yep. And so managed, excuse me, to take NEXTDC public, which I think is the only time it's really been done in Australia. It's been done a number of times in North America, where essentially you have an idea, your pre-revenue, as they call it, which means no customers, and some assets on the books and a plan, and got the backing to sort of go public back then at whatever it was, 75 cents or $1. And that's been really fundamental in how we've shaped the organization and had to manage, high capital intensity, but the public reporting every 6 months and so on. Yeah.
So obviously pre-revenue or just about to have revenue with your 2-megawatt data. So what's been the journey through NEXTDC over, is it 15 years?
Yeah, 15, 16.
So 15 years, obviously tiny company then. So you've gone through that true startup phase and we've been working with you guys for 8 years?
8 years, yeah.
And we've seen in 8 years a massive change in what the business does. What's that felt like for you as you've gone through that, the different, like, does it feel like distinct moments in the business? Is there like 4 or 5 clear, this is when it changed? And step changes or?
Yeah. I mean, if you really deeply think about it, every year's been different. Every year's been, as we say, another record year, which essentially means, you've grown in excess of what you've previously done. But we got to the point, anyone who's had the privilege and the honor of kind of being highly visible to the whole org, leading parts of it or all of it, would probably recognize this. But we got to a point probably in, 2016 or 2017, so 5 or 6 years in, where I couldn't necessarily guarantee that if I met someone in the business that I would recognize them. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not great with names. It's not my forte, but I'm generally pretty good with who's actually sort of part of the team and who's doing what.
Yep.
So that growth point was interesting. And as well as being interesting, it's actually a really important moment because you start to realize how the organization could fracture if you don't wrap a strong culture around it.
You're a very regional business too. Like in terms of, when I say that, I mean, you guys seem quite comfortable with lots of people working in different spots. Like it's not like, we just walk through our office where every desk is full and we're all sitting together and obviously we have sites, but you would have people in very key roles in different states, and that's just been normal seemingly for you guys for a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's been required. I mean, if you look at, one fundamental difference between telecoms, where I came from, and data centers is, whilst, a lot of the engineering and methodology is global or across the company, ultimately every data center is a local relationship with, especially at the enterprise level. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And we had moments whereby certain markets didn't have coverage. Sorry, let me take a step back. So as Craig and I were growing the business essentially out of Brisbane, and we started thinking about the sort of executive coverage and so on, we made a conscious decision, from how do you find people? Because you want good people and you don't necessarily want to force them to live somewhere they don't have to if you don't want to. Mm-hmm. And we made a conscious decision and said, we will be absolutely fine if we have exec coverage in Brisbane, that's already in existence, in Sydney, in Melbourne. They're going to be large markets. So almost from the outset, we've had that non-collocated executive, which has helped us. Yep. And then we had markets that didn't get any coverage, and we had to sort of figure out what to do there. So Perth was a great example. It grew, we invested, we had certain team members that were sort of locally really important from a functional perspective, whether it be customer coverage or operating or some project management. And we tried various things to create kind of a team leader that didn't have direct responsibility and so on. But in the end, what we found really is, if you're investing in a market, then make sure you grow the team to support that. The cultural coverage is really important. and just constantly be ready to change and take feedback from the team. So,
and that was one of the best things I think you guys taught us, was using technology to actually build a culture through, right? Because we entered into COVID.
Mhm.
And probably the best thing when we did enter into COVID is that we knew how to communicate with our teams and with you guys. Because what we did learn to do is use Teams and use other, technology to actually communicate and be comfortable with.
I think we were using Skype.
We're using
when we first
Skype.
started working with you guys.
And I think the unsubscribed version, so we all used to get kicked out of the meeting after 45 minutes. But having done that and us actually building our IT infrastructure to be able to communicate through Teams and, fully digitally, I think that really led us into...
You guys were very comfortable working that way before COVID, and we were, for us, it was so abnormal. And we just
we'd never been on a video call, let alone with clients, and then obviously going through trying to navigate some tough times. Now, being comfortable in that lead up by practicing with you guys and sort of understanding how to do that properly, and recording conversations, using all that sort of tech behind it, like that was a really good lead up into COVID. Having VPN systems so we could work remotely and everything else. Like, we probably don't talk about that too much, but in reality, we were sort of seamless in the way we communicated, and that was off the back of that.
Yeah, and look, we're all pretty into our technology in varying degrees across the exec. Craig saw the need and the opportunity as soon as COVID was announced. So we went almost immediately, I guess it was February when people started getting concerned. We went very quickly on his instruction to plan and execute for home working. If I remember rightly, Jeff Arndt was partway through getting ready for an upgrade, and it was, nope, do it tomorrow kind of thing. And so we embraced that opportunity to sort of use those things. And it's been very, very powerful. Now, at the moment, we're reinvesting in office space that's, got car parking, got transport, is less about being attached to the data center. We've now got lots, you can never be at the right data center if you happen to work there, because you're going to have to do a tour at the other one or whatever it might be. So we're now reinvesting in that culture. But I think if by keeping both the technology and the people, ultimately, that's how you get the best outcome. So it's always a bit of balance, but that'll be another point in time for us as a business. We, you talked about the growth points as we went into our second set of data centers, which was basically when we met and started working with you guys. We had some challenges, again, from a scale-up perspective in terms of design management, construction management, worked our way through that, continued to demonstrate to our customers that we care about them, and we're not perfect, but we will get there. And that's been a theme all the way through us. So we absolutely care about our customers. But that COVID time, that change, that opportunity for the ops team to realize that they are genuinely sort of physically attached to those jobs, and other jobs can be thought about differently. That sort of created a theme inside the business. And then
theme that to drive efficiency, or just a different way of looking at it?
Yeah, efficiency, and the fact that we have to acknowledge, I think this is probably that we've got two sort of classes of folks who work for the business. No one's necessarily more important or less important, but we've got to acknowledge that the folks who are in the DC ops team and the security teams, they cannot do their job without being at site. And there are things that go with that, from whether it's recognition or support required. And then you've got a whole stack of people who, some need to go to site from time to time, some don't. But just that recognition as an enterprise, that we've kind of got a, almost traditional enterprise business with people at desks doing whatever they need to do, and a genuinely hardcore operating business. And they need to be thought about together and separately as we manage and grow the business. That was probably the moment.
Yeah.
Well, the other moment that was really interesting was when no one could fly into Victoria.
Yes.
We started running full-blown production crews to follow the commissioning teams. So, your engineering teams that were stuck across the country could still dial in, witness test our commissioning, throughout the process. And that was that. I'll never forget the moment that I was walking side, and we probably had a production team of probably about 8 or 9 people. It looked like we were shooting a movie.
No, that's been amazing.
So you spent 14 years as the COO?
Yes.
And last year transitioned to a different role,
Yes.
head of development, which was part of your work before. But so all that sort of operations piece now, that's another person's role, and you're just focusing on the head of development.
Yes.
Yep. And I think it's probably, I was thinking about this driving this morning, is short of government departments, there might be maybe one or two of your peers at other data center providers who have a capital rollout or a building program as large as what you are managing.
Yeah.
Like, what's the scale, just for people listening, of the capital rollout or the projects that you're delivering over the next couple of years?
Yeah, so we're coming up to results. So I can't be super specific, but we're there or thereabouts from what we forecast, and it's in the range of high $2 billion to early $3s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what we've done over the last 12 months. Yeah. And then the next 12 months we'll be doing more.
Yeah.
And if we look at what do we want to get done over the next 5 years, so individual very large sites now. So we've got a couple of sites in Western Sydney. We've got a very large site that we've just acquired over towards Geelong. We've got what we're doing in Tullamarine and what we're doing in Footscray. So all of those sites are well north of $2 to $3 billion each, fully invested. And that's just from NEXTDC's perspective. So that excludes the IT infrastructure.
Yeah.
And the very large sites like over close to Geelong would be up in the 15 to 20 billion all up. So our annual spend is obviously staggered, if you like, across depending on what stage of development or investment each of those sites is at. But yeah, the scale of opportunity to invest and construct, and then the governance that's needed to make sure that we manage that and deliver on time, deliver safely, keep the costs where they need to be, and ultimately then continue to prove to our customers that when they need capacity, we'll deliver it, and when they need more, we're ready. Yeah, it continues to grow.
Because that scale of capital rollout or construction projects would be large for a state government, which would be done at a very different scale of resources and all that sort of stuff. So how have you gone? Because that would probably represent obviously the AI. I don't know what the right term is, but revolution or introduction of AI into the demand for compute you'd say is a step change in the scale of the projects. Like they're Moore's Law, they've always been going up.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's been a big step on top of that.
Yeah.
So how has that felt within your organization? And now that you're sort of probably at the start of that, or beginning of the start of that next scale of projects, what does that feel like within your organization, and what's your observation of the industry as it's moving into that different phase?
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple of can we do this sort of moments, and then you go, okay, but ultimately, it's not just numbers, but it's just numbers. So if you keep your focus on the relevant amount of detail, then in sort of putting a plan together or forecasting cash flows and so on isn't any harder per se. You just have to up the ante on the level of detail. So that's something. On the delivery side, I think we're starting to see now that if you're delivering a particular amount of infrastructure that is probably 5x what you would have delivered 2 years ago in that moment, with the right planning and the fact that all of the pieces are larger, it's actually not that much more kind of complicated. I think what's really complicated it is the time pressure. So it's clear from our client's side that the investment that they're making in the IT infrastructure, which is really what's supporting AI, whether it be inference or agentic or whatever it is so large that there's an increased pressure on them to sort of convert that to revenue.
So, there's no point having a whole lot of really expensive NVIDIA racks that aren't running.
Yeah. And there's also an opportunity, which will be a certain window to kind of be first or second or third and not eighth or ninth. And then that's adding complexity, that amount of pressure, and balancing that with, ultimately people and what's genuinely achievable and what looks like fast but is actually slow because you got to clean up afterwards. All of these things are kind of coming to the fore. And I think the last thing I would add is the shift from air-cooled, as in circulating air through the IT, to liquid-cooled continues to be a challenge that the industry's rising up to. It's been interesting to see other parts of the supply chain emerge and take part in this.
Might just pause on that because there might be people listening who don't appreciate exactly what you mean by that. But to put it into simple terms, is the servers now are so powerful that if you imagine, it's like going from back in the day, you had an air-cooled Porsche.
Yes.
And sorry, really,
I might into
really
where you go with this.
Stuff here, really relatable stuff when I start to talk about this. But you have a air-cooled car.
Yes.
But once it gets to a certain, you can't cool enough like that. It's not power. There's not enough. So you have to move to liquid to actually be able to get the heat out of the unit. That's
really it. Yeah. If you go into, so the data halls per se don't look that different. If people have seen them in the movies, you essentially go into a very large space. There's lots of boxes with flashy lights on them.
Yep.
The main thing those boxes do is convert the electricity that we feed them with, and part of our job is to make sure that's incredibly reliable and clean and precise to heat.
Yep.
And then that heat needs to be removed from that room, otherwise those servers will get too hot and shut themselves down, and that's not good for the service and so on.
Like your computer at home, if you had it, if the fan wasn't working or you had it sitting too close to the wall,
or you forgot to open the cupboard when you turn it on.
Yep.
Yeah. All those things, which is why we have data centers ultimately. And the amount of electricity or energy that each of those servers can now consume is 10x, 100x what it was 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, when we were first building data centers, they probably would have been 7 kilowatt racks.
Yeah, we deployed a 7 kilowatt rack, and most of them were consuming 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep.
That then sort of gradually moved up to 10, 13, 20, 25, all of which is still doable by essentially pushing cold air towards those machines. They have fans inside them that suck that air in, goes over most of the bits and pieces inside them. Hot air comes out the back. We would then take that up into the ceiling space, take it over to the side of the data hall, cool it down, running it over copper coils full of colder water, and around you go. But that airflow had gotten to the point where it just could not grab enough heat as it went through the IT.
Yep.
And we were starting to see data halls that required incredibly large amounts of airflow.
Yeah. The laws of physics and space, just you're not going to be able to move that much air through that kind of space.
Right, exactly right. And so the industry has been talking about this for a long time, but credit to NVIDIA, who've essentially forced it into mass production. Yep. So now rather than moving that air, we essentially have small pipes that come from that cooling coil, that area, if you like, on the side, and take liquid to each rack, each device. That liquid goes into the device, flows through and around the really hot, important chips and microchips that are in there, comes back out much warmer, having extracted the heat.
Yep.
And it's much more efficient to carry heat in liquid, in water, than it is to carry it in air. Takes that back to the edge of the data hall where that heat's moved to the heat rejection system.
Yep.
So that change is essentially, I talk about it maybe moving the data centers into what might be a vaccine production factory or a food, very high food production type facility, because the level of cleanliness inside those pipes is crucial.
Yeah. It's a phenomenal amount of, and this is the pressure point you get, is like the amount of stainless steel. And like, I remember there was a point where like certain types of connections worldwide.
Were not available because manufacturing had not caught up.
Yeah, that's right. They went from doing it for food production and hospitals, which is probably a pretty static sort of growth curve, to this exponential growth curve of like every new data center in the world needs these type of fittings and connections and blah, blah, blah.
And that's happening across the board. People will see in the paper, how, random access memory's gone to 5x of the price, and cheap laptops don't exist anymore. But that same demand, exactly as you're saying, is happening in the infrastructure side as well.
Yep. So the racks now that your customers would want to put into the data centers that you're building would probably be typically now, 100 kilowatt minimum sort of thing, up to 300 is sort of commercially available.
Yeah, that's the current zone.
Yep.
And in the pipeline, if you like, in the labs or pre-test areas, between NVIDIA and other infrastructure providers, there's talk of taking it up to 1 megawatt.
Yeah, which is an amazing thought.
Yeah.
So considering that everything's 5 to almost 10x of what we're delivering today.
Yes.
And the industry thinks it's really busy as we stand right here, right now.
Yeah.
What are sort of things you're thinking about that when we start construction or ultimately start design, what are the key things you're thinking about to actually, to make these deliveries more achievable and to get, better, more reliable supply and supply chain sort of into the mix of design?
Yeah. I think we would all agree, and it kind of started from the safety lens, but the less sort of detailed, complex, high-risk work that happens at a construction site, the better.
Yep.
And so that then takes you to pre-construction or off-site manufacturing. We had some good early success with that. We worked with yourselves and others. Rather than having generators brought to site and put inside a room and then everything wrapped around them, we just have them built off-site and craned into location. So that whole modularity or modular construction of the parts that you need, moving that off-site is probably the single most important thing into factories. Yeah. And then how do we wrap around that a shift at the data center site from sort of a incredibly skilled and detailed bespoke construction project that creates your product to a highly repeatable, essentially manufacturing or sort of putting together of the piece parts at the site.
More standardization.
In order to have higher deployment speeds, lower risk at site for the amount of work that needs to get done, put the work in the right place where it can be done in factories. And essentially, I think the bit that people don't talk about enough for me is there is just so much opportunity and we want to be successful. So the sooner we can deliver a particular capacity, capability, data center site, the sooner the folks who are required at site, and there will still be many of them and they'll still be pretty skilled, can move on to the next one and move on to the next one. Yeah. And then in behind that, the manufacturing continues to grow and the capability here in Australia to run those AI platforms and understand what you can do with them will continue to grow. So that safety and speed at site based on standardization, modularity, assembling rather than constructing is the kind of the way I try and think about it. Is prime.
Yeah. You guys were pretty early in doing a lot of quite interesting modular stuff. Like I recall we came up and had a look at what you were doing at S2 and I think you did at S3 too. Very interesting modular switch rooms that you slid into the side of the building, quite complex in some regards. And I recall you saying at the time they were really good, but I think I'm not sure they were faster or cheap. Well, I think you were pretty sure they weren't cheaper, but at the time you're like, I'm not sure that was faster or cheaper. And we've done a lot of stuff over the journey of going, is modular the right solution here? And in a lot of cases we come to, I actually don't know that it is. Like it feels really good to say modular. And then sometimes you find out, actually, maybe it's not the right solution. But it seems to me that now, if you think of money was the constraint, money and time, then you think about the question differently. Then if you start to think about there's actually a resource constraint now.
Yeah.
Like it's not purely just the assumption that you could just do it on site always and get it, we'll just get a whole lot of electricians to go do it on site because that'll be a little bit cheaper. That assumption just may not be correct anymore. Like, or where you're building them in the future, a little bit further out of town.
Yep.
Are you going to be able to attract 1,000 electricians to go and work on that project? Is that a real thing?
And ultimately, I think if you look at other industries, maybe not nuclear, but other industries where they've had the same realization, where essentially the value in optimizing every single individual component at individual sites versus the value of standardization and the safety and the speed and the cost effectiveness that it brings you outweighs it. I'm sure if, airline operators, if you get an Emirates version of a 777 and then an American Airlines version of a 777 that actually got to the infrastructure of the plane, they probably want differences. But ultimately, they get a better cost structure because they're all built identical and they operate them identically. And so there's lots of benefits.
Yep.
But I think that the ideas were great and it certainly helped us out. So at S2, for instance, in one of our sort of most complex projects, we essentially install, if I remember rightly, 24 2.5 megawatt switch rooms over the course of maybe 3 long weekends versus, just a trailing 6 months of here comes some switchboards, here comes some UPS, here comes some transformers, skid them in, slide them in, all that work. But ultimately from a cost perspective, unclear, because as we've discussed, you can double up structure if you're not careful and so on.
Yep.
But I think what it all goes back to is the design has to be around the fact that you are going to use modules and you're not essentially taking what's a bespoke sort of construction focused design in parts of it into the factory and leaving the other parts behind. You have to kind of do the whole thing from the outset.
Yeah, because the constraint is physical people, but also engineering talent.
Yep.
Like that's not an infinite pool of people to do. Yeah, if everyone's doing this bespoke product every time, but there's now, I don't know how many data centers are people working on across Australia, but it would be a lot. That's not an infinite pool of people with the talent to do that.
Yep, absolutely.
I think from our perspective, the most exciting part of working with you guys is that there's no such thing as a crazy idea. So, even trying something different leads us to a whole nother place, and born out of conversations around, using bridge beam technology to build buildings. And we never knew at the time that we were going to hit COVID and, having built the buildings without propping and everything else allowed us to actually rationalize our restricted workforce. And so there's always, out of the spin-offs of some of the crazy ideas, like the opportunities that we've found to protect, obviously, delivery has been amazing. So, we feel completely like we're off the leash to think about crazy different things, which from what we see has made you guys probably the leaders in thinking differently in what we see out there. And then, there's a lot of others that are copying what you guys have done, and we're all typically together onto the next version and the next version, chasing obviously different things at a point in time where cost is tight, program's probably a bit softer. We've looked at, the most cost efficient. When speed's a factor, we've got obviously a whole heap of tricks of different designs that we've been able to use. So we've probably found that as probably the most invigorating thing in our careers, to be able to have that freedom to think differently.
Yeah, and it's worth sort of thinking back a little bit, and for anyone who's been involved with us, I mean, we ask a lot, there is pressure, we expect a lot, but ultimately the opportunity to figure these things out is relatively unique. I think it's hard in some very large successful organizations to drive the change, or you end up being part of the delivery part of the business that kind of does business as usual. And if you're lucky, you get to go and work in the ideas part of the business and occasionally kick it across kind of thing. Whereas, in general, we're all in the ideas and deliver part, which has been a privilege.
Well, I think that's because my reflection on it is that I think it's because of the nature of the people in your organization or your industry and then your customers is that because it's fundamentally most of the, obviously you guys are doing it's infrastructure as well, but there's a lot of people with tech backgrounds or worked in tech businesses or working for tech businesses. And the mindset about improvement in tech is so different to the mindset about improvement in construction. Like in tech, you think that everything should be double every 2-3 years. Moore's law, which and the improvement and I do recall something you said once that really stuck with me is like, well, yeah, of course your customer will expect it to be better. Like everyone expects it's going to be better next time. And that kind of oozes through, I think, the way you guys approach it. And maybe that comes from your customers as well, of just like, we did it in whatever we did, 14 months. Well, surely it should be quicker next time.
Yeah.
And is that a pressure that you guys feel from your customers and the whole sort of, where does that come from?
Well, some of it comes from our roots. So we're very conscious that we were a new organization in a world of pretty mature organizations. And as I think back on some of the global conferences that we would pop up at, and we end up on charts with Equinix and Digital Realty and NEXTDC. And how do we get on that chart? So making sure we punch above our weight and then are able to follow through has always been a credo internally. We've looked to hire people who, pursue excellence. It's one of our internal kind of cultural goals, and give them the head to do that. But absolutely, from a competitive pressure or customer pressure, the need to deliver better, faster, cheaper, continuously in that loop it's been in the industry for the whole time as far as I can remember.
Yeah, and I think the thing that for people who in construction who haven't necessarily worked in a data center yet is that what I think sometimes doesn't get spoken about is the improvement that the data center industry is forcing into the construction industry.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think about the safety and the data center providers like yourselves and then the hyperscalers above and their expectation of what safety is and how it's thought about is very different than, and you know, Dave and God knows how many projects we've worked on over our careers, but the way that safety is thought about and the level of importance is from a customer point of view is very, very different working with data centers while still going, hey, we want to go fast. It's not, hey, we want to not do anything. It's like, hey, we've got to deliver, but how are we going to do this? Like I find that to be a really a positive thing that I think actually trickles through the whole industry is that because there's no shortcut to that. Like you have to do a lot of work and it's a lot of painful work and you've got to do it with your supply chain and you've got to upskill the teams and, you know, it's this endless cycle. But we see that through wide bits of the industry and we talk to suppliers and they will say, oh, if it's a data center project, we've got to work like this. And if it's a data center project, we have to do our QA like this. Or, you know, like we have some friends of ours who used to work who have a QA business, like an on-platform, which talking about QA back in the day, it was the ugly cousin, you know, of like, you know, that's the stuff the grade does, right? Whereas now the data center rollout expectation speed has just meant that now we have subcontractors and suppliers opting to choose to use, you know, we're moving onto this platform, we're trying to do it, blah, 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 which they just would never have done. Like it's just, and again, that becomes rollout across the whole business. So I see all these benefits that the data center is providing to construction. I'd be interested in because I've always found your observation of the construction industry somewhat comical in, you know, like it's, you know, like, you know.
A bad way. A good way.
Sorry. A good way, sorry. Like sometimes the questions you ask is like, why do you guys do it that way? It's like when your child asks you a question that's so simple that you're like, oh God, why do we do that? So what's you've obviously now been working with construction companies, ourselves included, and subcontractors and everything else for a long time. What if you were to sit back and think about the construction industry, what's your thoughts about it in terms of what it's good at, where it can improve, how you've seen it improve or not improve over the journey? We don't need to mention our names in the not improved bit. I'll just know it as you say it. So yes.
So we have lots of partners that help us deliver. Yeah. We have various design houses, whether they be engineers or architects. Yeah. We have various support agencies, town planners, project management, et cetera, et cetera. But what I always say, with no disrespect to any of those groups who provide us enormous support that we pay them for, is there's really only two folks who can impact the actual outcome, and that's the builder and us, the developer operator. From my perspective, anyway, this is how we've kind of run our projects. And so what I would say in general about the construction industry is when you find a good construction partner, they kind of dive in. And we've had the privilege of it being pretty tightly aligned. And whilst there's always, you know, this happened or that happened, or this should have happened before that should have happened, in general, the ability of the right parts of the industry to really get on board and try and get the right thing done is remarkable. I can't speak for, you know, other parts of the world. I've not done that there. And looking at our competitors' projects with other folks, it feels like it must have been the same. We just chose different partners and away we went. Yeah. So that's a huge plus. I think if I look at the industry from the outside, it's incredibly mature. There's only a certain amount of maturity that must allow you guys to run at reasonably slim margins and sort of continue to deliver. But I do feel that's something that's kind of holding you back as an industry. I'm not necessarily talking about you guys or any particular company, and sort of trying to figure out how to.
What do you mean? Sorry, the slim margins is what holds you back.
I feel like the slim margin is now de facto.
Mm.
And if that's just it, construction businesses operate at 3 or 4% or whatever the number is. And so the instinct is just to defend that because the perception is there's no opportunity to make that better.
Yep.
To make it 8% or 12% because the market can't afford to give projects out where you take all the other costs, double that margin and put it on top, and then, business cases fall over.
Yeah.
Whereas I genuinely believe, and whether it's standardization, which not all industries can do, but through looking at methodologies all the way down the supply chain, that margins can be improved and cost outcomes can be improved. And, the levels of work and intensity could be improved. So I think there's a lot of underlying improvement opportunity that could lead to a better outcome and a more sustainable business.
Yeah.
I really, really believe that.
I'd be interested. I asked this question to a lot of people. I'm not sure if I've ever asked you. If you were to put a percentage on the waste in construction industry, time, effort, materials, blah, 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 what would the percentage be? What do you think that would be from the outside looking in?
My guess is it 50%? No. Is it 10%? No. Is it somewhere in between those two numbers? My guess is it probably is.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is a little bit of custom and practice.
Yeah.
I just look at the methodology for cable delivery, what gets cut and what gets taken away. I mean, presumably then there's a downstream copper industry based on that.
Yeah.
But that's not effective for the project or the folks who are having, around the board. And then I think the other thing...
But it's funny you say that because usually most people will say an answer, usually the number I hear is between 15% and 50%.
Okay.
And I would agree. I would lean more towards 50 than towards 15. But yeah, that's the number that most people have. And I think you're right. I think historically contractors in our sort of world, infrastructure is a little bit different. They tend to have slightly higher margins, but also bigger swings, I'd say. If you look historically over most contractors, it's a 1% to 3% margin business.
Yeah.
Yep. But we all acknowledge that, there's somewhere near 50% waste in the system.
And the question,
which is a wild idea.
And the question back to us is that can we see, without charging our clients more, can we see a pathway to 10 or 12%? 100% we can. And we can see that we could still be cheaper in achieving it. But it's the layers, and probably the true waste isn't, we ordered too much copper or, we've thrown a whole heap of stuff out, right? That's probably the smaller part.
Yeah.
The big part is the inefficiencies through missing something in a system or a process or taking on a design that we haven't completely had time to clean up or we just haven't understood it.
Yeah.
And it's trying to chase down all those little leads to be able to, hey, how do we systemize it? How do we train it? And we've got this absolute obsession on trying to bridge the gap because we know the pressure you put on us to be cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and obviously faster. Now, we burn both. We're not cheaper because of these constant errors in the process and we take longer because we're rectifying the problems in that process.
Yeah.
So it exists. The pathway is there. But the coaching the whole industry to be able to get to that point, I think technology is starting to help us in trying to achieve it. And I think it will come where we should be cheaper and the price should be going backwards and our margins should be higher and we're faster. Like it's there, you can see it. It's just trying to clutch it.
It can be done. I mean, if you can, essentially take a piece of technology like a phone/computer and over the last 10 years, I don't know, double or quadruple its capabilities, whether it be the screen, the resolution of the cat videos you're taking, or the memory, the fact that it's got AI locally buried inside it now, all for roughly the same price all the time, it can be done. Yeah. Thinking about that as we talk, I think that time pressure is directly related to the problem. Okay, because I constantly feel people around me going, I've got ideas, I just don't have time to sit back and implement them. And then we go, well, maybe we should get a separate team to implement these ideas, but they're not in the thick of it. So how do they introduce it, right? You've got this. And so then I think about, look internally over the horizon about the timelines for the next sets of developments and projects. And I think part of the problem or challenge ultimately is, and if you were a military logistics program, and you'd just be rolling your eyes going, yeah, we thought of this 100 years ago. You got to spend...
We sorted this out in 1942.
You got to spend 90% of your time planning.
Yes.
And then deliver it in 10%.
And
we have no faith or no, I don't know what the right word is, no ability to commit to that 10% delivery time because we need to contract here. And then just constantly work through replan. And then you've got other factors, right? You can't necessarily wholesale redesign because depending on the town planning requirements, all put in place for good reason, you might have to go backwards from it. So there's all these kind of constraints.
Yep.
But ultimately, I genuinely believe if we could find our way to spending more time, much more time on the planning, at a broadly speaking, and then execute.
Yep.
We'd end up in a much better place.
Yes.
But we have these pressures on us. Yeah. We've got these programs from the last couple of years. Well, normally in order to deliver that, we should be, digging the ground or rising out of the ground by this point. So those become milestones in our mind. And then we have the other one, which is, well, if we haven't made a decision, we can't go buy that and get those 100 plumbers or 60 sparkies or whatever it is, and we might lose the opportunity. So there's all these pressures that flow through the whole industry.
Yeah, it's interesting. Gabe and I think about it in a couple of spots. Is one, quality in doing stuff twice.
Yeah.
And then there's a bit of that's sort of the other side of the coin of that is design, where you never designed it properly.
Yeah.
So that there's all this work in that. Like, I always say to everyone, every RFI is a defect because you had a drawing and a spec and it clearly doesn't work.
Yeah.
But we think it's the most normal thing in the world. Oh, that's what we're doing. It's like, I know, but it makes no sense.
Yeah.
And we just think that's normal business. And it's like, clearly it means we've done it wrong back here and we've never fixed it.
Yeah.
Like it's so, but we would have, I'm 1,000% convinced that 80% of the work that we do as a builder, this is not a great sales pitch, 80% of the work that we do as a builder is complete bullshit, right? It is just fixing mistakes. Like, that report doesn't coordinate with that report, doesn't coordinate with that drawing, and trying to make that all work, upstream, downstream, sideways. And that's just a lot.
We would have more RFIs on a project than what we would have defects on our defect list on the back end of a job.
Yeah.
So if you are thinking about RFIs as a defect, like that's a significant volume of work to deal with whilst you're building in parallel. It's crazy to think.
Yeah, and every one of them creates all this work of like, is it a variation upstream?
Yeah.
An administrator needs to make that decision. And if it is, I need to send it. And then that creates a whole new workflow on your side of the fence that would bounce around between 10 people to come back to us, to come back to you, to come back to that's that. We have it downstream that might affect 5 subcontractors where we do that exact process of like, they said to us, we go, I don't think that's the right number. I need more information. Send it back to me, blah, 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 backwards and forwards. Like, it's just custom practice. We just think that's what we're doing. That's the job. Yeah. And it's like, it is dumb. Like, it is crazy that's the job. But no one can see that, but that's what we always do. It's like, I know, but it's just, we're spending all our time doing this and it makes no sense. So we see that as 2 real killers and doing things wrong. Like, and you've done it and you have to redo it. Like, when you talk about productivity, there's not much worse than having to do the same work twice. And usually when you do it the second time, it's not the way you want to be doing it because you're doing it after the fact.
Yeah.
In a bad access or in the wrong place. Or now it went from being a bad job to a really bad job. So that. And then I think the other one too is you were talking about is the planning, like the productivity of the workforce is this big sleeper issue that Dave and I own.
Very focused on that at the moment.
We own a formwork600 or 700 workers. And like we like to tell a story of like we were doing a job just up the road here for another builder. So it's not for Kapitol. So they were our formwork business working for another builder. And we would have 40 people on the deck and they were doing a 6-day cycle or a 7-day cycle, which was
they're doing an 8-day cycle.
Yeah.
We ended up cutting the workforce on the deck in half. So we took 20 people out of that team and we started converting 4s and 5-day cycles.
Yep. Just by let's go through every person and work out what are they doing and why are they doing that.
And those 20 people, did you have anything else for them to do?
Yeah. We didn't sack them. No, we're not. No.
I'm not being flippant.
No.
But this is part of the culture as well.
Yeah.
There's plenty for everyone to do, right? So great.
Yeah. So
just by detailing
Well,
like
everyone thinks going faster is more.
Right.
Whereas what productivity is actually going faster is less.
Yep.
So, and making more
fast, all that stuff.
and accountability.
Yeah. So we've got one right now. We're doing another job, similar problem. This is for us, a tall, skinny tower in the city. And we need to do like a 5-day cycle on the structure. And the guys have been struggling to do a 7. I said, can we just sit down and draw out every hour of what the 5-day would look like?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the second that we wrote it down and went, how would you do it? How would you do it? How would you do it? Let's map every hour in advance. We did it. Literally the next time. And it's like, once everyone sat down and thought about it and went, what would that look like? What would that look like? What would that look like? How would you do it? How would you do it? How would you do it? The second we did it, we did it. Whereas when we'd been trying for 3 months and they're just being like all these, oh, you won't believe it. This came up. You won't believe it. It's like it's complicated. But there's only that many things that can change.
Yep.
So let's just map it out, and then you can do it. When we were everyone's just trying their best, and they were trying their best, but they weren't planning. It wasn't planned. And the second they planned in another level of detail, like hour by hour for 5 days, they literally
and that was with the firm that's you guys own. Yeah. And I guess the question of folks who operate these firms, are they open? Because I think the real challenge is, you got to be open to that integrated planning.
Yeah.
The kind of RC word for it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you got to say, hey, if we can work together and get this done more quickly, I can make a better margin.
Yeah.
It can be safer. I can move on to the next job.
Yeah.
Everyone gets paid. We don't want jobs dragging out for years because, all that stuff. But you got to be open to finding out that your systems aren't great and they can be improved and so on. But I think that's a real challenge.
And I think those cracks are becoming craters because I think culturally, Devo's on the job. He's a great foreman. He knows exactly what he's got to do when, right? Reality in the data center world is that the scale, the constant increase on 400-500% of what you're doing year on year. All of a sudden, Andrew, the great foreman, who is looking after 15 men, is now looking after 100.
Yes.
And doesn't have that ability to work in that level of detail.
Yeah.
So where jobs are bigger and there should be more potential margin, our trades are going backwards.
Yeah.
Because one, they're not thinking about how do I scale? So I have 5 Andrews. What's our process and systems in between? How do we go micro to actually give our teams a fighting chance? That is probably our biggest pain point across our whole trade pool is that, yes, you are growing 3-4 times, but what are you doing to actually make that work? And ourselves, we're probably in front of the pack because we've only known that year-on-year scale. So we're constantly hiring in front. We're obsessed with systems, processes, and still our delivery in certain circumstances is at mixed reviews because of the scale. And but our trades, what we're finding is we're trying to really coach them into thinking about it, but they just can't get their heads around the fact that Devo, the great foreman, can't now go and deliver where he's delivering a $20 million job, can't deliver the $130 million job. And he was running jobs that were air-cooled, now they're water-cooled, and all of a sudden it's not working. So...
But I've got this thesis that there's a real immaturity in the market that comes from that, because everything's a little bit bespoke. So it's really hard to measure.
Well, I mean, that was one of my other observations, I think, which was probably completely a non-surprise to everybody else in the industry. But I couldn't believe it when I finally figured out that essentially every single building that's built, probably worldwide, is bespoke. And you've just got a whole industry geared up to make it so. You want a slightly different air conditioning unit? Yeah. Great, we can charge you for that. You want a whole team of architects? Yeah. Great, we can,
Yeah, well, the block of land is the starting point. Then you've got planning rules that would actually say you're not allowed to build a building that looks the same. So you start
that too.
So you just start from this, it's instantaneously bespoke.
Yeah.
And then, so you end up with a lot of times, new client, new builder, new consultants,
new trades,
50 different trades, different suppliers.
Yeah.
And then you wonder why it can be a messy process because there's this, you're not this, like the complete opposite of a factory where it's like, 100%. We're going to do this again, iterate. This is this one-off special.
Custom built. Yeah.
Never done again with the same people, move on, which is just wild.
Yeah.
But my theory is that the tech that we're actually helping to build will help the ability to measure and get more meaning out of the different bits of data. And the world that I picture is that where I think you get there is because you need to make a real change, you need to tie it to the financial model.
Yeah.
Right. Is that so if you could picture a world where you care about productivity as the client, I care about productivity as the builder, the subcontractor cares about productivity, but we can all actually measure and see each other's productivity and we share in the win and the loss of it.
100%.
That is where you actually, in my mind, would genuinely move the needle because all of a sudden we can go, I can see what that decision that I made about that type of switch room did to our product. I see what that caused.
Yeah.
And yep, we can tweak that.
Yeah.
And I think one of the immaturity of the industry has been is because we've been no good at measuring that we don't trust we don't trust what someone's telling us. So I don't believe it. Once we get to reliable, I believe that the data that's telling me and I can see how I can move the needle, I feel like that's going to be the step change in construction personally. The people who work out how to do that will actually pull a lever that actually unlocks the value. Because if you think about our numbers, like probably our costs as capital is probably of our construction contracts is probably 15 to 18% of the total cost. The big variable cost is the workforce. Below that 85%, probably half of that is labor.
Yep.
And that's the number that you can really move the needle on really, really in a large way.
Yep.
And that's the bit that's hard to see. I reckon we do it all the time. Try and talk to subcontractors and say, show me how you track your labor. How do you tell your productivity? And I don't know about, we've never got a good answer for anyone of like, no one has this perfect way of doing it. And the reason is because the measurement's always a little bit different. Oh yeah, but that type of cable tray is a little bit different on this then, so you can't really do it that way. And like all these very technical reasons why I can't quite, that measurement's hard to get, but I just keep thinking we're not that far away from the tech being able to help us do that.
Yeah, I think so. I just go back to the kind of fundamental, you've got to have a methodology that allows you to really interrogate what looks like a really difficult answer and sort of prove to yourself that it is a good answer. And then you've got to have a team, to your point earlier about experimenting, that's prepared to kind of back it. And if it doesn't go well, despite all the detailed planning and analysis, that's okay because we're on a track to sort of trying to improve. It's really important. So one of the things that we're focused on that. So 3 areas really from our business at the moment. So trying to reimagining the contracting stack, which has been done before in very mega projects in the UK, rapidly figured out, but by getting the team members around the table at the beginning and making it transparent, you get a better outcome. But there's effort in sort of creating that. And so we're pretty focused on, the Australian standard construction contracts almost kind of set you up in a certain way of thinking about how all that put together.
Those contracts are probably fundamentally, and we use them upstream down. They're quite adversarial in their nature.
That's my point. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So figuring that bit out. Then there's the planning. So in my experience, I'd love to hear different, but finding a really, really good planner, meaning someone who's awesome at, whether it's Microsoft Project or whatever you use, is pretty hard, right? There aren't hundreds of them.
No.
And there's a combination of training and deep experience that gets them to be good.
And there's 2 skills. There's the skill of, it's the software skill of using the platform. And then there's the logic skill like.
And so what I think I see mostly is 2 or 3 different scenarios tried out and then a program landed. And then the only way to improve that is to kind of shout at each other and squish this bit. And so we're conducting a whole bunch of work and we'll be introducing you guys to this on a sort of AI-supported, constraints, modeled ability to just iterate and iterate and iterate. Now, with that capability, be able to generate its own programs and you take the human experience skill part out of it, maybe in some number of years or whatever. But ultimately, the way I try and look at that is to say, okay, the resource that you've got and you rely on is a really skilled programmer because he or she knows kind of how some of this is going to impact downstream. But if you can give that individual the opportunity to massively iterate different versions, different constraints, tweak this, tweak that, make that area a bit bigger so you can get more people in. Now that actually makes it worse. Control that, rapidly, and then come out with a program that you've really interrogated. I think there's a huge opportunity there.
Yeah.
Then how do you then sort of measure that downstream? And then that's where the really hard work is, where it kind of flows from the programming table and upwards towards us in terms of visibility, and then down through the subcontractor to the point where you're saying, guys, every day we're going to have a brief. There are 9 work fronts on this site. Work front A is this one. We expect 6 plumbers, 4 sparkies, and 2 chippies in there to get this done. And at the end of the day, we're going to report back, hopefully somewhat pretty efficiently, that there was 5 chippies and 2 plumbers, and we didn't get this done, but we got that done. So we're live, we're not sticking to the program or the program was screwed, but we're doing that in almost real time and driving that visibility.
Yeah.
And if we can get to that point, which involves trust as well as systems capturing it, then I genuinely believe we can all get better.
And I think the missing bit to that is the work that needs to be done downstream through our subbies, and because we are a subby as well, we
don't introduce ourselves as subbies as a starting point. That's the second introduction.
We are anyway, yeah. But it's actually understanding how we priced it. What have we allowed?
Yes.
Like, what's our resourcing at the point of building a price to deliver?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the measure that most of our trades are missing, and inclusive of the way our formwork business used to do it. Now we're obviously pushed to making sure we can clearly see what our assumptions on the resourcing side of things. Because if you can't tie it back to what have you allowed, if you allowed 10 men in zone 1A to do the formwork, and then we actually run our program against that and then create stretch targets in between to measure the productivity. I think that's a missing chunk.
Absolutely.
On 50% of the cost of the projects that no one's really focusing on. There's just too many square meter rates out there. And if the project doesn't run the way you'd hope it would, then you increase your square meter rates.
Yeah.
So it's all this artificial inflation purely because no one quite understood what was allowed in the first place to be able to measure against.
Well, and there's also this perverse thing where in most things you would expect as things got bigger, you would get efficiencies and you would save money. Whereas somewhere in a subcontracting, like workforce business, there's this other perverse thing that happens is as you introduce more, that gets bigger, that means more people. That means the more people are probably going to be managed worse. So the productivity drops, so the price goes up. Because actually, if I was doing this with 20, 30 people, I know I'd get this kind of productivity. If I need 200 people, that productivity will drop because managing that 200 people will be really, really hard. And we don't have the systems and the structures and the organization to do it. So you miss the NEXTDC for the privilege of making a bigger project. We need to charge you more for electrical or mechanical because we need more people, and the people are really hard to manage. Not because they're bad people, just that it's more complicated. You need more
because we didn't simplify.
So that's
then you have blended rates because you've got A teams, B teams, C teams, D teams merged into one because the size is so big.
A great example of this, I think, and I've not done heaps of research, but if you look at the rooftop solar industry here in Australia, it's absolutely smashed it out of the park. Most of the installs are done by relatively small local firms, right? There is no national. Go to North America, it's 3, 4, 5x.
Is that right?
Yeah. All done by big national, because that's kind of their
and
DNA.
The small, lean, agile,
efficient, fast. The right dollar goes to the right place. They make their money. Jet ski at the weekend. Come back, do it again. So
and that's the amazing thing because like obviously we price a lot of big services packages now, and people are like, oh, it should be cheaper. And then you actually talk to the people, and they're like, no. Once the workforce gets to a certain size.
The layers and
the productivity and just trying to keep that productivity high is so hard that, it's if you've got 300 people on the one project for you as one contractor, trying to make sure those 300 people are working the same as 30 people would is a very different challenge that a lot of businesses and have not worked out how to do. So they end up just having to, I just need to tweak my productivity rate and just or charge an extra couple of % on top to allow for the fact that it probably won't run as well, which is a real indictment of the industry that we've got to solve that. But this is what happens. Yeah. And it will happen This is not a new problem.
No, it's not. But we got to figure it out. And yeah, absolutely. Which I think again, you go back to design. We have safety in design, and we have other standards that we put in place that we don't design in productivity. Exactly. That's what I was going to say, buildability, but you're right. Productivity is the more specific word. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I was walking around one of your projects, the project we're building for you, and the guys were showing me all these cables we've got to pull. And they're going, oh, yeah, this is going to be a pain because it's a tiny little space between the chiller modules and the switch rooms, and it's also a walkway, and we're doing it with scissor lifts and all that sort of stuff. And because I'm not there all the time, so I just walked down and said, well, why wouldn't we just build a scaffold? And they're like, but this is the disconnect between, we would build the scaffold, but that's money for us.
Yeah.
But the scaffold will get rid of all the working at heights, going up and down, moving it, barricading, spotting. But again, just a mindset thing to think of productivity is like, oh, if we build the scaffold, yes, that's a bit of a pain for us for 5 days. But for the next 6 weeks, we will pull 3 times as many cables.
Yeah.
So again,
but having that faith to make the investment in the planning or the buildability infrastructure to nail it quick.
Or to understand what slows us down here. Oh, what slows us down is because we've got to step and spot, and then someone walks past, and we've got to come down, and that just kills our productivity. But again, asking the question differently, and us as builders to our subcontractors and how we think of that relationship and how we help each other is a different way of thinking. I'll finish on one question because I'm conscious you've got the investment portfolio probably of New Zealand to manage. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. But how have you found, probably 5 years ago, you saying you worked in data centers would be a relatively niche sort of thing at a barbecue, whereas now it's probably worldwide one of the most topical. Indeed. In that it is the physical face of AI, which is probably, it depends who you ask, but it's definitely one of the bigger technical revolutions of anyone's lifetime. How have you found that, and how's your organization found that, going from being sort of I won't say back of house, sort of an industry that isn't in the public's mind to now very much so?
So we put a lot of effort into sort of education and creating content that, is relatively easy to share. That big switch to visibility, we could see coming. And so we took the time to work with some of the other large data center folks in Australia, whether they be hyperscalers or other developer operators.
And is that because you saw it coming in the US?
Well, some of that, but what we certainly saw was that there was understandably different approaches from different states and different local councils who all had their own considerations. And what we realized is we were probably making it even harder for them to consider us because they would hear different things from each of us. And so whilst there are certain things that are different about us, there are also certain things that are common. And so we put a group together to try and focus carefully on what's common and create that as a kind of essentially an education pack or a consideration pack. And what is common is certainly the tailwinds driving the investment and, why you might want to back this, Australia large. That then became our first industry peak agency or peak group, Data Centers Australia. Belinda's doing an amazing job.
Yeah, she does.
Corral some of that, create a focus point for questions. Again, we're not perfect. There's lots of different parts of government, whether it be federal, state, there's neighborhood and communities that have incredibly important views. But I think that's been the really dramatic change, which again, there'll be other very mature industries just going, oh, we had to sort that out 40 years ago or whatever. But we're going through that moment right now. And I just sincerely hope that our focus on, the construction phase isn't pretty, but it never is, whether it's an apartment block or an office building or a factory or, whatever it might be.
Doing construction, my experience is very rarely does everyone loves the building, everyone hates the construction site. You've got to do your best at, but no, you think about it in your own street. It's a pain when someone builds a house in your street.
Absolutely.
Because there's people parking there, it's a nightmare.
So you got to sort of act on that and reflect on that and then continue to try and join up the dots between, we want the productivity, we want the capability here in Australia, jobs will follow and so on and so forth, and link that to the incredible visibility it's got now. And honestly, some of the things that did happen or people are worried about in North America just can't and won't happen here because from a a regulatory perspective, there's lots more safeguards in place, and yet we've still got a pretty solid reputation of being a place to come and get data centers built. So I think Australia's struck a pretty good balance there, which is amazing. But I understand the concerns, and we just got to rise to those. Yeah, but I think generally inside the business, people feel like they're working for organizations that are more visible and more pertinent. Ultimately the opportunity and the challenge it brings is we as an industry have to kind of do what we say and back what we say and head in the direction that the employee pipeline is going to support. And I think all of that strategically pushes us in the right direction. Do we want to use less carbon intensive concrete and steel? Absolutely we do. How do we get there?
Yeah.
We all want to do these things, and sort of demonstrating what we can do now, what we are doing in the future, what changes we're going to make, making all that more visible is generally to the good. It's just hard, and we have to run towards it.
Yeah.
So that's been the big change, whereas before we were just in the background.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, even for us, we've found that it's an interesting thing that we started putting data centers for you guys, and that would have been a very niche thing in the construction industry, to now it's one of the more topical discussions in the country. Yeah, which is it's an interesting change in visibility and scrutiny of what you do and how you do it. Yeah, which is again, some of the scrutiny is positive, of that you have to look and go, are we doing it? Are we doing it well? Are we doing well enough?
Absolutely.
What could we do better? What didn't we do right?
And to be in an industry that's so relevant and important for the future of us as a society is, again, a privilege. And it's amazing. It'd be like being part, I don't know, when the railroads were rolled out, or obviously not here in Melbourne from the airport perspective, but
oh, come on. You don't have to brag from you because you're from Brisbane and you've got a tree.
But these things don't happen that often. And so whilst it is challenging and difficult, it's absolutely the right thing for us to be challenged, and we just have to keep rising to it.
Yeah. Great. Cool. Okay, on that note, thank you for your time, Simon.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Dave.
Glad to be here.
All right, we'll wrap it up. Thank you very much.
All right, have a great day. Thank you.
Cheers.